The rain had stopped by the time the school bell rang, but the air still hung heavy with it, the kind of dampness that sinks into your bones and makes you shiver even after the storm has passed. The sky was a soft, silvery gray, and the sidewalks glistened as if the world itself was holding its breath. I was standing outside the school, waiting for the last of the children to file out, watching as they bundled themselves in jackets, pulling hats over wet hair. Most of the kids were in a hurry to get home, their energy bursting from the confines of the school building. But there was one girl who lingered. She was young, maybe 8 or 9, with dark brown hair that clung to her face in wet strands. She was holding a backpack that looked far too big for her slight frame, the straps digging into her shoulders. But it wasn't the backpack that made me pause. It was the soft, gentle whine that slipped from it, the kind of sound that might have been overlooked if you weren't paying attention. I tilted my head, curious. She caught me looking and immediately straightened up, as if she had just been caught doing something she wasn't supposed to. But then she did something that made my heart skip a beat. She carefully unzipped the side pocket of her bag, and out came a small, trembling puppy. The little thing was barely more than a bundle of fur, golden and fluffy, with a coat like it hadn't been combed in days. It blinked up at the girl with wide, trusting eyes, then nestled its head against her chest, as if it knew the safety it had found in her arms. I should have said something. I should have asked if everything was all right, if she needed help, but instead I just watched. Is she yours? I asked softly, taking a step closer. The girl nodded, her eyes avoiding mine. There was a faint sadness in the way she looked down at the dog, as if it weren't just her pet, but something far more fragile. She hesitated, her hands trembling as she adjusted the puppy in her arms.
"Yes,"
she whispered. She's mine." The puppy, though so small, seemed to hold an ancient sadness in its eyes. It felt like she had seen more than any creature should. There was a soft little blue scarf tied around its neck, faded and frayed at the edges. I couldn't explain why, but it made me think of someone who had once loved this dog deeply. Someone who had cared for it. Someone who might have been like her. I wanted to ask more, to pull her into conversation, to offer my help. But instead, I just let the moment stretch between us, silent and full of unspoken understanding. Maybe she too was grieving. I had seen grief before. I knew it well, as the weathered lines on my face would testify. A year had passed since my daughter had passed. A year filled with empty rooms, quiet dinners, and a house that no longer felt like home. There were days when I still reached for the phone to text her, but the messages never went through. This girl, this puppy, something about them stirred that emptiness inside me, made the grief feel raw again. I watched as she slowly bent down and placed the puppy gently on the ground, allowing it to stretch its little legs. "Her name is Daisy," the girl said quietly. "I found her at the bus stop. She didn't have anyone with her." The way she said it was as if the words didn't just describe a dog, but a piece of her own heart. It wasn't until the next day that I saw the change. I was sitting in the teacher's lounge, trying to drink a cup of coffee that tasted more like regret than anything else, when I saw the girl again. She wasn't carrying her backpack this time, but there was Daisy sitting at her feet in the corner of the classroom. The puppy was curled up in the warmth of a blanket, eyes half closed, and for a moment I thought the room had fallen still, as though the whole world was holding its breath. The children around her were talking, laughing, but there was a quietness in her corner. The puppy seemed to have a presence that demanded silence, that softened the air. She was the quiet one, the girl who didn't speak unless spoken to, who kept to herself at lunch and often sat alone, even though there were other children who might have played with her. I had seen that loneliness in her before. The way she looked out the window during class, as if she could hear something far away that none of us could. And I knew that silence. I knew it well. But then, something happened. As if Daisy had whispered something into the girl's ear, she spoke. She looked up from the floor, where she had been tracing patterns in the wood with her fingers, and spoke in a voice so small, yet steady. "Can I answer the question?" The entire room went silent. Even the teacher paused, surprised by the change. I wasn't sure what surprised me more, the fact that she had spoken, or the fact that she had done it with a kind of quiet authority, as if her voice was just as important as everyone else's. She answered the question, her voice barely above a whisper but clear, and in the few moments that followed, I watched as the others turned to look at her, the barrier between them slowly fading away. It was during a quiet afternoon in the classroom, while the children were working on their assignments, that Daisy made another breakthrough. She trotted over to one of the students, a boy named Liam, who had been struggling with a speech impediment. I had noticed how he often avoided speaking, the words tangled in his throat, his face turning red with frustration. But now, with Daisy in front of him, he smiled. Tentatively, he reached out his hand, and Daisy licked it gently, her tiny tail wagging. The class watched in silence, and something shifted in the room. Liam, after what seemed like forever, spoke. "Good girl, Daisy." And for the first time, his words didn't stumble. They came out clear, unbroken, as if the simple act of being the puppy had unlocked something inside him. As the days passed, Daisy's presence grew more significant. She wasn't just a dog, she was a bridge, a silent healer. The students who had once been distant now sought her out. She would nudge their hands, rest her small head on their laps, and listen with eyes so full of understanding. And they, in turn, began to listen too, to each other, to themselves. But Daisy's past was still a mystery. It was one rainy afternoon when the truth came to light, or at least part of it. The girl had brought Daisy to school again, and this time she was holding something. A small, crumpled piece of paper folded over several times with a note written in childish handwriting. She hesitated, almost as if she didn't want to share it. But then she unfolded it and read it aloud, her voice quiet but steady. "Dear Daisy, I have to let you go. I'm sorry I can't take care of you anymore, but I know you'll find someone who will love you. Always, your friend, Lily." In that moment, a weight shifted in the room. There was no dramatic gasp, no great reveal. Just the understanding that the puppy, Daisy, had once belonged to someone who had loved her deeply. Someone who had to say goodbye. The girl who had found Daisy, now clutching the note to her chest, looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. I saw a glimmer of recognition in her gaze. "I think Lily, I think she was my sister," the girl whispered, her voice cracking slightly. "I never knew where she went. I thought she had left me, but Daisy, she was hers." I wanted to say something that would make it bell to hurt, but I didn't. Because sometimes, no words are enough. The next day, I watched as Daisy slept peacefully in her corner of the room, her tiny body rising and falling with each gentle breath. And as I watched, I couldn't help but feel that, maybe, Daisy had come to us for a reason, not just to find a new home, but to help us heal, to teach us how to love again. And in a way, she had saved us all. As the weeks passed, Daisy's presence grew more and more integral to the fabric of our classroom. What had started as a simple act of kindness, a girl bringing in her puppy to comfort her, had transformed into something profound. I began to see the quiet healing that Daisy had brought not just to the girl, but to everyone. It was as if she had unlocked something in all of us, something deep and untouched for far too long. There was something remarkable about the way Daisy moved through the world. She didn't demand attention. She didn't push her way into anyone's life. She simply existed, a soft, calm presence in the corner of the room, her eyes watching us with a quiet wisdom that felt almost too old for her tiny frame. I watched as the children, once shy and withdrawn, began to open up, as if Daisy had shown them how to trust again. One afternoon, during free time, I noticed a small group of children gathered around Daisy. They were sitting on the floor, speaking in hushed tones, and their hands were gently stroking her fur. The girl, whose name I had finally learned was Emma, sat in the circle too, her hands resting on Daisy's back. Emma was different now. The sad weight that had once held her shoulders so tightly had lifted. She spoke more freely, laughed more easily, and even shared her thoughts in class without that deep-seated fear of being overlooked or misunderstood. Daisy had brought something out of her, and out of all of us. It was during one of these quiet moments that I saw Liam again, the boy with the speech difficulties. He was crouched down beside Daisy, speaking to her in a voice so full of tenderness that it made my heart ache. "You're really special," he said softly, his words no longer tangled in hesitation. "I think you might be magic, Daisy." I couldn't help but smile at the simplicity of his words. But there was truth in them. Daisy was magic, not in the way that we think of magic with tricks and wands and fairy dust, but in the way she brought light to dark corners of hearts we had long forgotten about. Liam had once been afraid to speak in front of others, afraid his words would be lost. But with Daisy, he had found his voice. He wasn't the only one. There was Sarah, who had never shared much with anyone, even her best friend. She started writing again, her pencil moving furiously across the paper as if the words had been waiting to escape her mind for years. And Tommy, the quiet boy who never raised his hand in class, who had always been so withdrawn, started talking more. He wasn't just answering questions now, he was asking them. He was engaging. Daisy had given him that. And then there was me. I had been living a quiet existence, trying to fill the silence with work, with routines, with anything that could keep my mind from drifting back to the day my daughter had passed. The house had been empty for so long, and though I had filled it with memories, photos, and old mementos, nothing could stop the feeling of loss from swallowing me whole. But with Daisy's arrival, I felt something shift within me. I wasn't sure if it was the way the puppy would look at me with those wide, trusting eyes, or if it was the way she would curl up at my feet, sensing the sadness I tried to hide. But every time I saw her, I felt that weight on my heart lighten just a little bit more. It was as if Daisy was telling me, it's okay. It's okay to feel joy again. It's okay to love again. I didn't have the courage to say it out loud, but there were days when I caught myself laughing with the children, joining in their play and feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Daisy had pulled me out in the fog, step by step, word by word, touch by touch. One evening, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and lavender, I found myself sitting on the front steps of the school with Daisy beside me. The children had gone home, and the once bustling hallways were quiet once more. But the stillness no longer felt heavy. There was peace here now. Emma came outside and sat beside me, her eyes thoughtful as she looked at the puppy curled up beside us. I never knew how much I needed her, Emma said softly, her fingers gently stroking Daisy's fur. When I found her, I thought she was the one who needed me. But it's been the other way around. I nodded, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. I had never spoken of my daughter to anyone here, but in that moment, I felt the words rise in me, as if they had been waiting to be said. You know, I began quietly. I lost my daughter a while ago. And for a long time, I didn't think I could feel whole again. I didn't think I could open up to anyone. But Daisy has shown me that sometimes it's not about fixing things. It's about being willing to heal, slowly, in whatever way you can. Emma's eyes met mine, her expression filled with quiet understanding. She reached down and hugged Daisy, who responded by nudging her head against the girl's hand. I think she's the reason we're all okay, Emma whispered, as if she were revealing some great secret. She's the glue that holds us together. It wasn't long after that when we finally learned who Daisy's owner had been. Lily, the girl who had once loved her deeply, had been forced to leave her behind. But she hadn't just left Daisy. She had given her something far more important, the gift of love, the gift of hope. When Emma met Lily again, it was a quiet, tender reunion. Lily had moved far away, but she had never forgotten about her puppy. And though the reunion was bittersweet, there was something healing in it, something that brought both closure and comfort. The love between them, though separated by time and distance, had never truly faded. As I stood in the doorway of the classroom one last time, watching the children scatter into the world, I realized how far we had all come. Emma, Liam, Sarah, Tommy, and even me. We had all changed. Daisy had taught us how to open our hearts again. She had shown us that healing doesn't come in grand gestures, but in quiet moments, in the soft wag of a tail, in the gentle brush of a small paw against your leg, in the trust of a puppy who had seen too much, yet still believed in kindness. I glanced down at Daisy, who was lying peacefully in her favorite spot by the door, her eyes half closed in contentment. She had saved us all, in ways we couldn't have imagined. As I left the classroom that day, I couldn't help but feel a deep, overwhelming sense of peace. If you're reading this, I urge you to remember that sometimes it's not the people who need saving. It's the animals who show us how to heal. Share this story, believe in kindness, and support animal rescue. You never know when the next little miracle might walk into your life. The days grew warmer as spring crept in, gently thawing the last traces of winter from the earth. The classroom, once quiet and heavy, now buzzed with a soft energy. The students' laughter was no longer a distant sound. It had become part of the fabric of our days, real, vibrant, and full of life. Daisy had truly worked her magic, not just with Emma, but with all of us. One morning, I noticed something different. Emma was sitting at her desk, her hand raised confidently in the air. It was a small thing, but I hadn't seen her do it before. For weeks, she had been shy, hesitant to engage with the others. But now, her eyes sparkled with a quiet determination. She looked up at me, waiting for permission to speak, her voice steady as she answered the question. It wasn't just that Emma had changed. It was the ripple effect that Daisy had set in motion. Around the room, there were other subtle shifts. Tommy was less anxious about answering questions, and Sarah's smile, which had once been rare and fleeting, now came more often, a soft bloom of hope that I hadn't expected. They were becoming who they were always meant to be, shedding the layers of fear and doubt that had kept them small. Daisy, as always, remained calm in her corner. She no longer needed to be the center of attention. Her mere presence was enough to keep the classroom grounded. But something had shifted in her, too. She no longer huddled in the corner with the same wariness. She had become comfortable, even confident, as if she knew she had found her place in the world. And then came the day when I found Emma standing in the hallway after school, looking at the small blue scarf she had kept tied around Daisy's neck. It had become a symbol, a quiet reminder of what had been, both for her and for me. "I think it's time for her to go home," Emma said softly, her fingers running over the fabric. I raised an eyebrow, confused for a moment. Home? Where would she go? To Lily, Emma said, her eyes glistening with unshaded tears. "I know it's time. She's been with me, but I think she needs to go back to the person who truly loved her." It took me a moment to realize what Emma was saying. Daisy had been with us for months now, and it had become so easy to think of her as part of the class, part of our family. But in that moment, I understood. Daisy's journey had come full circle. She had brought us together, but now it was time for her to find the home she had once known, the home that had lost her and needed her again. I could see the love and sadness in Emma's eyes as she carefully untied the scarf from Daisy's neck. It was as if she was letting go, but not without a deep understanding of what it meant to give something back. In the stillness of that moment, I realized that Emma had learned the hardest lesson of all. Love doesn't always mean keeping. Sometimes it means letting go so that the love can continue to grow. The reunion, when it happened, wasn't anything like I had imagined. I had pictured tears, an overwhelming flood of emotions, a dramatic return. But instead it was simple. Emma and Lily, the two girls who had once been so far apart, now stood facing each other. Emma handed the scarf to Lily, her voice soft but filled with certainty. "I think Daisy belongs with you," Emma said, her voice steady. Lily, now older, stood still for a moment, looking at Daisy. Her expression was unreadable, but I saw the recognition in her eyes. Slowly, she knelt down and let Daisy approach her. The little puppy, though grown, still carried the same gentle demeanor. She trotted over to Lily, sniffed her hand, and then licked her face in a soft greeting. The reunion was quiet, no grand gestures or words. It was simply the coming together of two hearts that had been separated by circumstance, but bound by love. I didn't stay for long after that. I stood back, watching the scene unfold in front of me, the bittersweet moment of connection and closure. There was something sacred about it, about the way Lily and Emma exchanged looks, no anger, no resentment, just an understanding. Emma had given Daisy back, but in doing so, she had gained something far greater. She had learned that letting go doesn't mean losing. It means giving someone the chance to grow, to heal, and to find their own path. As I turned to leave, I heard Emma's voice one last time. "Thank you," she whispered to me, her words carrying a depth of gratitude I hadn't expected. "Thank you for helping me find her. And thank you for letting me love her." I couldn't speak at first. My throat tightened, and I fought the lump that had formed there. But I nodded, my heart swelling with something I couldn't quite name. It was pride, it was joy, it was relief, all wrapped up into one. When I looked back one last time, I saw Daisy, sitting by Lily's side, her little blue scarf draped over her shoulders once more. There was a sense of peace in the air, the kind that comes with knowing that everything had fallen into place, even if it wasn't how I'd imagined it. Back in the classroom, life returned to a quieter rhythm. But the echoes of Daisy's presence lingered. Not in the corners where she used to sleep, but in the hearts of the children she had touched. Emma still came by after school sometimes, sitting on the steps with a smile that didn't feel as forced. Liam, too, would often ask about Daisy, his voice steady now, filled with confidence. The changes were subtle, but they were there. And as for me, I found myself sitting in the quiet after school hours, sipping a cup of tea as I looked out the window. I had learned something profound over the last few months. Healing doesn't always happen in grand moments. Sometimes it happens in the small, everyday acts of kindness. In the wag of a tail, the sound of laughter, the softness of a child's voice speaking their truth. It's in the spaces between the words, in the pauses that allow us to breathe, to reflect, to grow. Daisy had come to us for a reason. But it wasn't just about saving her. It was about how she saved all of us in ways we would never forget. And so, life continued, with Daisy's memory carried in the hearts of the children, and in mine. And though she had gone home to Lily, I knew the journey wasn't truly over. It was just another chapter, one filled with love, with healing, and with the quiet understanding that sometimes the ones we save are the ones who teach us how to heal. The days that followed were marked by a quiet, bittersweet sense of change. It wasn't just the classroom that felt different, it was the entire atmosphere around us. I would catch glimpses of Emma, her face no longer burdened with the sadness she used to carry. She laughed more often now, and her steps had the lightness of someone who had finally found their footing again. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. Daisy had not only changed Emma, she had changed all of us. There was something about the way people began to approach the world after Daisy left that lingered in the air. As if, in her absence, we had all learned how to see the world with a little more softness, a little more openness. Even in the days when I sat alone in the quiet of the school, I could still hear the echoes of those moments of connection. The sound of laughter, the rustling of books, the light tapping of small hands on desks as questions were asked, as voices grew steadier, more sure of themselves. I would walk through the empty halls, remembering how the weight of grief had once settled in every corner, in every room. Now, there was only a quiet hum of life, of potential, of healing that I had never expected. One afternoon, as I was organizing papers in my office, a letter arrived for me. I didn't recognize the handwriting, but as I opened the envelope, my eyes immediately fell on the words. Dear Mrs. Jacobs, I wanted to let you know that Daisy is doing well. I've been watching her, and every time I see her play with the children at the park, I feel like she's the happiest she's ever been. It's as if she's never left the place where she belongs, surrounded by love and care. I'll never forget what you and Emma did for her. I hope, one day, you can meet her again. But for now, know that she is home. Lily, I stared at the letter for a long while, my fingers tracing the neat, looping handwriting. It was strange, how something so small could fill a space so big. I had never expected to hear from Lily, but here it was. The confirmation that Daisy's journey hadn't ended when she left. It was just the beginning of something new. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it to my chest for a moment. There was something so deeply moving in the simplicity of it. Daisy was happy. She had found her place again, surrounded by love and the kind of care she had always deserved. And for all the pain that had come before, for Lily, for Emma, for all of us, I realized that love was never a straight path. It was full of twists and turns, of moments we didn't expect, of things we never thought we would be able to give up or receive. A few weeks later, Emma came to visit again. This time she was alone. There were no more backpacks with little puppies hidden inside, no more quiet, hesitant looks. Emma stood in the doorway, her eyes bright, her posture taller than it had ever been. I heard from Lily, she said, her voice calm but filled with warmth. She says Daisy is still her same old self. She's happy. I smiled at her, the weight of those words settling in me. I'm glad to hear that. I said softly. You gave her something that was more important than just a home, Emma. You gave her love. Emma nodded, her hands clasped together in front of her. I think I understand now, she said, her words full of understanding. It's not about holding on to everything. Sometimes love means letting go, and in that moment I realized just how much Emma had changed. How much we all had. We weren't the same people who had walked into this story months ago, heavy with our burdens. We had learned something. That healing wasn't just about finding the right answers. Sometimes it was about learning to let go, learning to trust, and learning that love can heal in ways we don't always expect. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of gold and orange, I walked outside, my steps slow and deliberate. The air was cool, but the warmth of the sun still clung to the earth, wrapping everything in a gentle embrace. The school grounds were quiet, as they always were after hours. I found myself standing by the old oak tree, the one that had always seemed to stand watch over the playground. I glanced down at the spot where Daisy had once played, where she had become more than just a dog. She had become a bridge between hearts, a quiet witness to the healing that had taken place. And as I stood there, feeling the cool breeze against my skin, I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. The laughter of the children, the quiet moments with Emma, the stillness that had taken hold of my own heart, all of it had been a part of the journey. When I opened my eyes, I saw a single feather floating gently down from the tree above. It drifted slowly in the breeze, its edges soft and delicate. I reached out to catch it, letting it rest gently in my palm. It felt like a sign, like something telling me that, even in the quietest moments, there was still magic. There was still hope. There was still love. As the weeks continued to pass, life moved on, but the lessons we had learned, the healing we had experienced, stayed with us. Daisy may have gone home, but her impact lingered. The children were kinder to one another, their laughter more genuine, their friendships deeper. And for me, the weight of grief, once so consuming, had started to loosen, if only just a little. I wasn't ready to forget, and I knew I never would be. But I had learned to open my heart again, to let life in all its messy, beautiful complexity. And somewhere out there, Daisy was still living her life, surrounded by love, by a girl who needed her just as much as Emma had. Sometimes, we wait for a moment to heal us, for a person or an event to fill the empty spaces in our hearts. But sometimes, healing comes in ways we don't expect, in the quiet nudge of a puppy's nose, in the soft sound of a child's laughter, in the courage to let go when you've held on for too long. I think, if we're lucky, we'll find our way to those moments. And when we do, we'll be ready to embrace them with open arms. As the months passed, I found myself back at the place where it had all begun. The school playground, the oak tree standing tall and steady in the distance. It felt strange, yet peaceful, to stand there once more, knowing that the story had come full circle. The weight that had once held my heart captive had lightened, not through dramatic change, but through the slow, steady work of healing, of allowing myself to feel again, of letting go when necessary, and of understanding that sometimes love is what brings us back to ourselves. I remembered Emma and how she had given Daisy up, not out of loss, but out of love. That lesson had stuck with me more deeply than I realized. And then there was Lily, the girl who had left Daisy behind, but never truly forgotten her. I imagined the two of them, Daisy at Lily's side, still playing, still running free, as if they had never been apart. The thought filled me with quiet joy. I had learned something precious through this journey. That love, at its core, is not about possession. It's not about keeping someone or something forever to fill the void. Love is about giving, about letting go when it's time, and trusting that the love you shared will continue to shape everything it touched. That evening, as I sat at my desk, reflecting on the days that had passed since Daisy's departure, I heard a soft knock at the door. I turned, surprised to see Emma standing in the doorway, a small, hopeful smile on her face. "I just wanted to tell you something," she said, her voice quieter now, but no less certain. "I've been volunteering at the shelter. They're looking for people to help. I thought maybe I could do something for other dogs like Daisy." Her words, though simple, were a beautiful reflection of how far Emma had come. She had taken what Daisy had given her and turned it into something meaningful, something that would continue to ripple out into the world. It was no longer about one puppy healing one heart. It was about a young girl stepping into her own power, her own compassion, and using it to help others. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun setting outside. "That's wonderful, Emma," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I think Daisy would be proud." In the years that followed, I would often think back to that time when a little puppy, lost and alone, had walked into our lives and changed everything. Daisy had been the spark we didn't know we needed, the reminder that love isn't always found in grand gestures, but in quiet moments of connection. And sometimes, the ones we save aren't the only ones who heal. I never saw Daisy again, but I knew she was out there, somewhere, surrounded by love. And in a way, that was enough. Because I had learned it doesn't always stay where we expect it to. It moves, it grows, and it leaves behind traces of itself in the hearts it touched. And as for me, I had learned to open my heart once more, to trust that the love we give always comes back in ways we don't expect. That sometimes the things we let go of aren't lost. They're just waiting for us to see that love is never truly gone. So, if you're reading this, I ask you to remember, there is always a second chance. For us, for animals, for love, and for healing. Share this story, support animal rescue, and believe that no act of kindness is ever too small. Because you never know when you might be the one who brings someone, or something, back to life. And with that, I let the quiet evenings settle in around me, knowing that the story of Daisy and the story of healing would live on in the hearts of everyone who had been touched by her presence.